And just so thrilled to have everyone join us today. Also thrilled to have the continuation and support from our amazing sponsors. Bloomerang, thank you so much. Carrie Ann Munstead with your wonderful photography, and Katie with Staffing Boutique, you and your team for really supporting us as well for this show. So we have Julia Patrick, of course, the CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, there with her beautiful new headshot, as well as myself, Jarrett Ransom, CEO of the Raven Group, also known as your nonprofit nerd. And today is Friday, so we're really excited. We've really been doing our best for every week, and specifically on Friday, to offer these asked and answered sessions. And so what we have, and Julia, I know you just showed them, we have some questions that have come in during the week, both, during our live webcast, but also Julia and I receive a lot of private emails of people asking their questions via email or, through our LinkedIn and whatnot. So we have those questions. Is that right?
We do. We have a lot, and I don't know if we're going to get all of them, but this is like one of my favorite ones because this is about you, Jared. It says, this is hilarious. This is like, sorry, I did not pay attention in Detroit. Is that hilarious? Okay.
Yes.
I know, it is. This is like the shame game. Okay, it says, I have heard Jarrett give a few stats on how much fund development should come from different buckets. I'm trying to do some planning and I can't figure out how the percentages work. I have a fundraiser going virtual, some grant applications, a small but growing monthly giving society, good for you, and just a few government contracts. Could she please give those percentage stats again?
Yes, of course. I think I say these in my sleep. So the first and foremost is I want to say that nonprofits should need to have the majority of your funding coming from individuals. So that percentage, the best is about 75%. So if you can get your individual giving to about 75%, your grants no more than 30%. Okay, so you really want to have your grants to make up that funding diversity no more than 30%. There are some nonprofits that are really proud that they have predominantly funding coming from grants. And I'm here to tell you that is not healthy. It's not sustainable and it's not healthy. And I know I said that twice, but again, it's not healthy.
So I appreciate you saying that. I need to hear that. That's good.
Yeah, and it really is just so important to diversify your funding. Yes, you want to have event revenue. Yes, you want to look at earned revenue. Yes, you want to look at, where else might we be able to diversify our funds and to really have your revenues coming from such a diverse stream, right? Because when we look at anything that may happen and impact our economy, which we've seen most recently during this pandemic, is you don't want to be reliant on one particular funding source. I'm working with a client now, Julia, and they have over $800,000 from one funding source. Now, if that entire funding source were to go away, that's a really big gap, right? That's a really big gap. So how might we diversify? And I always say, you want to start diversifying now before that rug is pulled out from underneath you. So those are the big numbers. I'm going to say it again. 75% individuals is really your target that you want to look for and strive for. And then no more than 30%. You can absolutely have less, but no more than 30% on grants.
Cool. I'm glad that you, sorry, I did not pay attention in Detroit, asked that question. That's good. Really, seriously, I appreciate that. And we need to hear that enough. Okay, this comes from Barry in Washington. I'm assuming Washington State. It says, we were on track to have all of our insurance reviewed and rebid. Now, with all the changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the sense that we are going to have another big spike, should we hold off on this task? Yeah. It's a big job for our department, and I'm not sure if it's worth it now. Barry, I would have it looked at, and I would say that you now more than ever need to understand how your coverage might be impacted by COVID-19. So if you had, let's say, an employee or a client that could track their illness or the contagion of COVID-19 back to your nonprofit, whether during service or during outreach, how are you, and how could you be impacted? And what do you have that, what kind of liability? I mean, we all know in the nonprofit sector that you need to have sexual abuse, you need to have all different types of added layers into your coverage. But I don't know if anyone's ever thought about a pandemic or looked at this.
No, and I would agree, right, Julia, is to speak with your insurance provider and ask them, what are they seeing? What's best? What is it we need to do? And should we come back within the next 6 months? How frequently now do we really need to review our policies?
Right, I agree. But you know what, Barry, good job, because this is something that you need to be doing. I mean, too many organizations will be like, oh yeah, we've never done that. And it's like, no, you need to do this. Okay, this is an interesting question. Oh, I said interesting. We could make this like a drinking game every time Julia says interesting. God. Okay, this is a fascinating question. Minority candidates for board seats don't have the resources to fulfill our board of directors give or get. This means we just keep getting white men, name withheld. Wow. Okay, so go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So this is like kind of a racist question.
Yes.
I'm going to call that out because this is assuming that people of color have no financial means to participate on board service. So this torqued me out a little bit. And I'll man up and say that this person, did give their community, but I just didn't want them to be identified because I don't think they observed that there was peril in this question. Number one, there are many, many people of wealth and means in communities of color. Number two, if there's any type of corporate alliance, meaning that these board members might be coming from a larger company, those companies will generally secure those give or gets. And third, there's no problem, and this should be something that your board does, in scholarshiping people in so that they can participate. What does that look like? That means that you go out and you raise that money. You might have a board member that supports that. You might have an organization that supports that says we are going to do a better job at making our board more diversified in terms of who has a voice and a seat at the table, and we do not want any barriers. And if there's a financial barrier, we're only going to get the same types of people. So right now, somebody's like, stop talking. No, somebody just said, I love you right now, Julia. Amazing answer. Okay, enough. And scene.
So I'm going to echo that, and absolutely, that is exactly what I wanted to say, Julia, is for us, anyone, to not make the assumption that someone different than you, a person of color, indigenous, anyone from another community does not have the means, right? Like that first and foremost really jarred me to think how stereotypical, right? And you're right, it is very much a racist question to say, well, if we do, recruit a more diverse board, what if they don't have the means? Well, we can't make that assumption, right? And I don't want, this is not comparing apples to apples, but I can absolutely tell you that I have been stereotyped for being a nonprofit professional for not having the means, right? So I don't want to say it doesn't matter what community, because I'll tell you, I'm still learning, my own vernacular and language in which I show up with some unconscious bias. So it's really, just, you have to have a conversation. And first and foremost, I believe that all nonprofits, all boards, all governing committees really need to be upfront with their recruitment to say, here's our expectations. And for us to not have this bias to say, oh, but I'm sure you can't afford it. And Julia, I don't know if I've told you this story, but it's Friday and I'm going to tell it. Right. So I went on a date. This is a personal story. I went on a date and the guy says, so what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a nonprofit consultant. I think I did tell you the story. And he goes, oh, well, how do you make money? Right. And so that in itself, just being in the nonprofit world, me with my sarcasm, I said, oh, I don't. You're picking up dinner, right? Like, I just had fun with it. And I was like, this guy is clearly ill-informed, uninformed of the nonprofit sector. So again, don't make assumptions of any community or of any individual. Be upright, be forthright, be straightforward in your expectations. And this individual, whoever they are, will tell you whether they can meet those expectations or not. And I loved your scholarship component as well. I think that's a very viable option. When there's anyone that may not be able to meet that give or get.
Right. It's huge. It's huge. I was working with a board years ago, and their give or get was $100,000 a year. And they were, boo-hooing about their diversity. And I was like, well, then what can we do about that? And it was fascinating. I mean, they wanted to see it, but they didn't have a path, and no one had ever thought about the scholarshiping thing. So anyway, okay. Robert from Dallas. As our nonprofit has grown, absorbed some other programming, and expanded service area, it is time we look at changing our name and branding message. Oh, wow. Do you have any strategies for us to follow? Honestly, it needs to be done, but what an expensive pain. Also, my department will be in charge of this, and we are short-staffed. Yikes. This is like, people literally go to school and get their MBAs on this. And this is a huge topic, Robert. And I would say that you need to have an actual plan for a year. That rollout and name change is going to probably take a year. Certainly the messaging, it has to be something that week by week what it is you're going to do, and so that you can nail down the costs. Because everything from signage to marketing to your websites, it goes on and on and on. And it is not for the faint of heart.
Colors, right? Like whether it's painting your office or your campus or, your brick and mortar, changing the polos maybe that are monogrammed or that's my Southern talking, the monogram.
Yeah.
And Julia, I'll say, I have been really fortunate to be working with a nonprofit, and they told me, we really want to change our name. We want to change our logo. We want to do all these changes, and we know it's going to take some money. But who do you know in the community that understands nonprofits, and they really are professionals in this marketing arena and branding, and it's a process. It's not oh, I like this color and this logo and this name. It really is all encompassing. And the individual they chose to work with goes down to like, what are your core values, right? What is your mission? And really getting to know all of that before you even talk about your name change. Like, let's get back down to grassroots. Who are we, right? What message is it that we want to portray? And so I am watching this unfold currently behind the scenes, and it hasn't gone live. It hasn't gone public. And I have been privy to watching the transition begin. And it's kind of like an iceberg, right? What the public sees is very much the tip of the iceberg, but the organization and the marketing team, they're already working on what's underneath the water, right? Because they're working on that institutional transition before it goes public.
Right. And there's a lot, I love that you said that, because there's a lot to this. I didn't know you were working on something like that, Jarrett. I also think too that, you need to be sensitive about what are the other brand names that are out there across the country. Can you purchase all the domain names? I was moderating an AFP panel a couple of years ago, and somebody was talking about how they had renamed their organization, and they didn't realize that it was so close to another organization's name, and that other organization was getting some of their donations.
Ooh.
And it was in another part of their community. I mean, it wasn't malicious. It was actually not well executed or researched, So yeah, Robert, do not do this lightly. I think sometimes too, this will be my final voice on this. Sometimes we in our own environments get fatigued and we're like, oh, we need change. But it's really a diversionary tactic, And so look at what you really need to be doing. And if that's fundraising and getting out and reasserting your brand, that might be a better investment than just throwing it out and starting all over. Okay. And this is from Billy from Houston, Billie. I'm trying to sharpen my work skills and am thinking that becoming more adept at social media is a good investment. I've seen my nonprofit struggle with marketing and in particular developing creative materials. Hello. Should I invest learning in Photoshop or perhaps InDesign?
Oh, that's all you, my dear.
Yeah, it is. So I would say that, social media rules the day, of course, but social media needs strong branding and marketing if it's really successful. So if you don't have that internally, or you're trying to find people to volunteer, or you're just never catching up, there's some ways that you could probably do a hybrid where you get somebody that's a professional caliber to create some standards and some guidelines and some direction with imagery and tightening up your logo or your files or whatever, and then helping to guide you through the different things that you need to be, participating in. Because just in Photoshop and InDesign, those are going to be the necessary tools that you need to create the materials for your web presence and your social media. So yeah, but it's not easy. It's
No,
not easy.
and I want to mention Canva because InDesign and Photoshop is phenomenal. I am not versed in that, but for me, even for my company and some nonprofits that I work with, including the one that I'm serving as their interim executive director, we have hired a marketing communications expert, and she set our guidelines, right? So we have our specific colors. We have our branding and what complementary colors we can also pull in. So we have those standards, right? And then what she's done, which is phenomenal because she understands that we're very much strapped at cash when it comes to using Photoshop, InDesign, or just kind of those elevated design tools, is she's created a platform in Canva in which we can go in, utilize those standards, and create, because Canva does have some amazing templates, and they have the sizing specific to any and all of the social media, including rack cards and annual reports, and they have amazing infographics. So you might want to kind of use both of those opportunities with one another. So if you choose to do InDesign or Photoshop or what have you, take a look at Canva. And for those of you that might be watching and you don't have the budget, or you're working with a much more limited budget, take a look at Canva as well, because I think, it really does have some pretty basic, easy to use, right, platforms and systems.
Right. And remember, in software too, for nonprofits, you can always ask about the nonprofit rates. I mean, Photoshop is an Adobe product, and they have licensing specifically for nonprofits. Also, you can get that through TechSoup.
Yes, exactly. I was just about to say TechSoup would be a great place to look.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have Katie. I'm going to call you out. I don't ever do this. We have Katie on this show today watching from Staffing Boutique. And I would love, Katie, if you want to type in the answer. I hope you're still there paying attention. But I think we can wing this if you don't have an opinion. Okay, this comes from Beverly in Los Angeles. When the COVID-19 dust settles, I want to remain in the work from home mode. I'm not sure how or when to deal on this. Should I be connecting with our executive director now, or should I wait? We have an HR team leader, but she just does what our CEO says. Whoops. I don't want to jump the gun, but it might be a good thing. I'm even willing to work for a bit less as the cost of commuting would vanish. Commuting in LA, man, that's hard. That takes a long time. So the question is, and Katie, if you're available to chime in on this, Katie has Staffing Boutique, but I do think we're going to have a lot of people that want to continue on this work from home path. Maybe not full-time, maybe a hybrid, but what do you think? Katie, yay team. Okay, she just wrote in, yes, start the communication now. Go directly to the hiring manager now. So yeah, be forthright and be innovative and good. Thank you, Katie.
And I think we're all needing to have these conversations. And so, to realize that you may be the one to kind of like be the catalyst to have the conversations. Julia, I'm even curious what school's going to look like for my child next year. So while I do work from home, and that's the luxury that I have as a consultant, but everything is changing. So even though we're looking for the dust to settle down, the reality of this is there's going to be changes. And with those, we really need to consider, all the moving pieces. I'm sure you, as well as many people watching this, is we've all been, kept abreast of changes within our news. And so the news stations are really implementing, they're not implementing, but they're sharing the news of what schools are implementing for the fall. So who knows what's to come?
Right. Yeah, that's hard. And I think that's like, it's a day-to-day move,
Absolutely.
It's going to be changing. But I agree with Katie, if that's one thing that we've been reminded of, Jared, during this pandemic and the changes that have come to light, and new opportunities, it's communication.
Absolutely.
It's like Stephen Shattuck said last week, if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's true.
And he was talking about fundraising, yeah. Okay, this comes from James from Minneapolis. We are opening up for tours on our campus in a limited fashion and with a great deal of reorganization. I was super excited when I saw a huge increase in tour reservation numbers. Now I understand that this interest is being driven from a nearby university, when the college has made touring a shelter part of the curriculum. Oh my gosh, this is fabulous. It's costing me money, time, and stress for something that won't result in any fundraising or relationships. What should I do?
Wow.
That is a great question.
That's a doozy. I'm going to buck the system and say, if you truly believe there's no ROI or ROR, which is what Michelle brought up, return on relationship, first of all, I would find out whose curriculum this is on and call that instructor or professor. Absolutely have that conversation, and have that very transparent, authentic conversation, because maybe there's a way in which you can go present to the class. Maybe there's a virtual option in which that way it's a one-to-many as opposed to it taking up, time of bringing into the organization. Truth be told, Julia, there's some shelters that do not allow this, right? So one of my clients is domestic violence, sexual abuse. They do not allow visitors. They do not have the option for tours. But what we're looking at doing is actually implementing a CEO roundtable. So maybe once a month or twice a month, there will be a Zoom conversation. It could be lunch, it could be coffee, it could be any other time. But gosh, I would definitely call the the school and find out who is doing this and how might we create a win-win opportunity.
Yeah, and you could do a class, the old-fashioned class field trip, where you get that college or that professor involved, and it's like everybody shows up and it's a one and done versus 2 or 3 people here and there. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting thing, because also too, James writes, it's costing me money, time, and stress for something that won't result in any, big letters, A and Y caps, fundraising or relationships. I think that's also the wrong way to look at it. I think that you need to determine, and this is long-term thinking, but these kids are the future of our nonprofit segment, in terms of leadership, thought leadership, management. And so perhaps there is a way that this is building something. And definitely, if you're in a community where there is education that links to your outreach and your nonprofit, you should know what they're teaching, right? I mean, you should know what they're talking about, because that's coming into the workforce and therefore creating, opportunities. So anyway, very interesting, James. Okay. What's our time here?
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Okay. Okay, we heard Julia mention very briefly about everyone having an emeritus board. We need clarification on what this is and how it works. Nancy and Charlotte. Nancy, an emeritus board is the cheapest and easiest thing you will ever do in board management. It's simply a board classification for people that have left your board, who've maybe termed off, who might have served you, but they're retiring or personally, or they've moved away. Don't lose that connection. You put it on your website, you make sure that they're tied to you, you're sending them information, and maybe once a year or every couple of years, you have an event where you gather all the emeritus board members to meet the new board or the current board members. It's just a great way to tie past service back to you and to honor what they do. I mean, it's simple as that.
Continuation of stewardship, right?
Exactly. I mean, that should be a natural part, unless somebody left, with some unhappiness, and that's a different discussion. But yeah, I think that this is really, really important. So, hey, I hope you've enjoyed another episode of Asked and Answered. I mean, I think, Jared, the marvelous thing is, we always have an opinion.
Of course.
So it's cool. And you know what? I got to tell you, I have three more pages of questions that we didn't get to.
Well, I was going to say, sometimes, Julia, our opinions are polar opposite.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it work, personally. So everybody, I'm Julia Patrick. I'm the girl with the right opinions, and the right answer is Jared Ransom, the nonprofit nerd. So here's how to connect with us. We definitely want to hear from you. And Katie, thank you for engaging with us. She made an additional comment that says, you can't expect everyone to return to work if they are frightened for their health or their family's health. So that bumps to the question about work from home. And that's something we need to get Katie back on and talk about, because I believe that this is going to be something for all of us to really consider. Hey, we want to thank our wonderful sponsors. They keep us going. Make sure you shout out to them. So, because this is how we navigate forward. I'm Julia Patrick. I want you to have a great, safe, and restful, restorative weekend, because next week is going to be super busy for all of us in our sector. And I want to end with what I say every week, if I get it out correctly. Stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jared.
Thanks, Julia. Have a great weekend.
You too. See you later.